Good afternoon and welcome to this, our fourth webinar. So just to let you all know that we are recording this and we will be making it available on YouTube up until the point when we break to take questions, and that's when the YouTube recording finishes. So those of you that are joining us today live, that's great. If you have any questions as we go along, please put them in the Q&A box, and then it makes it easier for us to pick them up rather than trying to pick them out through all the chat as we go along. So we're talking about artificial intelligence at work. Why should we care? Well, why do I care? Well, frankly, I care because increasingly I'm seeing people, members who have used artificial intelligence to assess their claim, their potential employment tribunal claim. Now, the thing about artificial intelligence is that they're a tool, just like any other tool. If you use them in the right way, then they're good. If you use them in the wrong way, then that can cause problems. And they're not good, these AI tools, they're not good at assessing whether somebody has a claim with good prospects of success. So I thought it would be useful if we spend a bit of time thinking about what AI can do, what AI should be used for, and its potential impact on us and our members in the workplace. So as ever, before we begin, we'll start off with a little quick disclaimer. Nothing I say today should be taken as legal advice. The views are my own. And obviously, if you have any doubt or any questions about any of this, or if artificial intelligence is becoming an issue in your workplace, as I know it is for some of our members, then please do get in touch. Do get in touch with your officer or your reps, or any concerns you've got. Raise them, because we need to know. We need to know what's happening for our members in the workplace. So, what I thought we would do is begin by having a look at the big picture. Artificial intelligence, it's not magic, but it's a data-driven tool for management. What does that mean? Well, AI has huge potential. And, the people who talk about artificial intelligence, they tend to fall into kind of two camps. They're called the doomers or the boomers. The doomers are the ones that think that, artificial intelligence, the machine's going to take over the world, humanity's going to become extinct. Maybe they've watched too many Terminator movies. I don't know. I don't tend to subscribe to that theory because, I think as a race, I think we're hugely adaptable. I think we'll evolve. We'll embrace this technology and use it to our benefit rather than the other way around, hopefully. But that kind of theory is more what the boomers say, that this is going to help. This is going to help people to become more productive, and again, that's something that's not necessarily a good thing, because more productive for whom? Well, it tends to be more productive for the bosses, for the company, for more profit, more on the bottom line. But this is about a move away from change from, I suppose, from the automation of the physical, the machines, the Industrial Revolution, to cognitive automation. In other words, automating thinking. And in the past, maybe manual jobs were threatened by machines, and now perhaps knowledge jobs, white-collar jobs, are being threatened by machines. In fact, recently, a gentleman by the name of Mustafa Suleyman, who some of you might know, is the CEO of Microsoft AI. Now, he says that within 18 months, all white-collar jobs will be fully automated. Really? I'm a bit skeptical, to be honest. It could happen, technologically speaking. It could happen. The pace of change, the speed at which these tools are growing and gaining new capabilities that even just a short number of years ago would have been mind-boggling. In fact, probably still are to many of us. Technologically speaking, it is possible. But in reality, is it going to happen? No, probably not. Why not? Because of the speed of adoption. Most businesses are really just dabbling with this stuff, if at all. So it's a choice. Do we have to go with artificial intelligence? No, absolutely not. Perhaps it'll become a thing. Perhaps it'll become a selling point, a badge of honor, that all of our decisions are made by people rather than by machines. Who knows? But from our perspective, the important thing is that if our employers, if our businesses are going to move towards a more automated future, then we need to make sure that's done in a fair and equitable way, the so-called just transition, where technology augments rather than replaces human dignity. So that, we're not run by the machines work for us. That's the idea. So we'll see where that goes. Recent survey, by the way, shows that increasing adoption of artificial intelligence doesn't mean that people are spending less time to produce the same amount of work. What they're actually doing is spending the previous amount of time doing more work. So that's what we say about the increase in productivity, that the business gets more out of its people because some of the more mundane tasks, the more time-consuming tasks, are being automated. I think it's fair to say, though, that some industries will be much more heavily impacted by adoption of AI than maybe some other industries. For example, late in 2025, Amazon, they've cut 14,000 jobs from their corporate structure by flattening out the management structure and requiring people to work more efficiently. That's just mind-boggling to think that an organization can remove 14,000 jobs and still continue to function. What makes it even more mind-boggling is that at the start of this year, they removed another 16,000 jobs. That's 30,000 jobs in total gone from Amazon. And that's quite a huge impact in terms of, the rollout of AI and changes to the way things are done. So yeah, definitely some businesses will be more affected than others. But we need to make sure that in those businesses where, unions operate, that there isn't just a rush to adopt the technology just because it's there. So when we're talking about artificial intelligence, what do we actually mean? I think it's important that we actually just kind of break down what we're talking about and to some extent kind of demystify the technology. What actually is artificial intelligence? There's sort of two main groups, two main types of artificial intelligence. There's what's called generative AI and predictive AI. So generative AI is artificial intelligence that responds to a user's prompt or request with a generated original content, such as audio, images, software, code, text or video. Now we've heard, for example, of AI tools that can create short films, can create music. Google Gemini has recently launched a new tool within its Gemini package which can write songs. Is that art? Is it creating art? Well, I should point out, by the way, that all of the images that I've used in these slides today have been generated by artificial intelligence. I thought if I was going to talk about AI, I may as well use AI. So all of these images, these little cartoons that you've seen so far, they've all been produced by AI. Is it art? I don't think so. For me, art is about human creativity. Is the art in the form of the prompt? I don't know. It's an interesting question. Does it matter? Probably not. Generative AI use models that are trained. Now, the training data that is used for the development of these tools, this is the thing that is so controversial. The tools that create music, the tools that create video, the tools that create, text, whatever. The training of these systems is done on a kind of data farming basis, that the search engines go out and they really scrub across the internet and find all sorts of content. And this is why original content producers are getting very upset at the moment, because some of these tools are using, without permission, these original movies, original music, and using those to generate new music. Now, how does it actually work? Well, to be honest, I don't really know. I'm not a tech expert. I don't claim to be a tech expert. But from what I understand, it uses what's called an algorithm, which is basically a kind of form of computer programming, to work out what is the most likely sequence. So if you're using an AI tool to write a letter, you give it a prompt, it starts running off in a particular direction, and then the system then has to decide what is the most likely output. Now, this is what happens when you use AI to write complaint letters, for example. Because the vast majority of complaint letters get into kind of threatening legal action, you can find that you ask an AI tool to draft a complaint letter, and what you actually end up with is a letter of claim, which isn't necessarily what you want to do. You don't necessarily want to threaten to sue somebody. Perhaps it's somebody that you want to continue to have an ongoing relationship with. Now, is it really sensible to threaten to sue somebody? You fall out with your kids, do you want to sue them? Well, probably not. I mean, maybe you do, I don't know, but probably not. So that's generative AI. It's about creating new content, whether it's a letter or a video or a piece of music. Predictive AI, on the other hand, is more of a statistical tool. It's looking for patterns within data. And it's based on machine learning algorithms to find data patterns and forecast future outcomes. It's a bit like if you remember when you were at school doing maths lessons and you get a load of data points and you had to plot them on a graph and then work out what was going to happen if you moved along through a series of data points, and it's called extrapolation. And that's basically what predictive AI does. Now, the problem with all of this is that the predictive AI can be used for surveillance, for algorithmic management, as the slide says. That's where the AI becomes a real-time monitoring tool, so-called bossware. And it can be used in automated performance reviews. We're already seeing, for example, AI-driven driving monitoring systems, which can be used to see how a person drives. So my car, for example, when I pull up, it switches off and it gives me a score for how well I've used its hybrid system. That's fair enough, because that's about encouraging me to drive responsibly and economically and so on. But if that was being used to determine my performance in my job, if I was a professional driver, for example, the question then becomes, by what metric am I being measured? Do I score more highly on the system for running over the granny who happens to step out in front of my truck, or slamming the brakes on and not killing her? Well, surely, the latter is an infinitely preferable outcome. But if I get scored down for sudden braking, you just take the point. The problem is nobody really understands how these systems work, how are they programmed, particularly if you're buying an off-the-shelf package as an employer. So these are the challenges that we've got as an organization going forward. How do we embrace this technology? How do our employers embrace this technology without it having a detrimental impact on our employment? As I said before, the generative AI system requires huge amounts of training data, because the system requires all of those thousands and thousands and thousands of data points in order to be able to work out what is the most likely sequence to follow this particular prompt. If I, for example, tell it to write a grievance letter, it needs to have read a few grievance letters in order to be able to work out what a grievance letter should look like. Now, the problem comes when that training data has built-in biases and contains things which are structurally discriminatory. Historical data can often reflect certain perceived norms in society. The historical gender pay imbalances, for example, that type of thing, that certain roles were excluded from certain from certain demographic groups, for example. And all of that, if that is in the training data, because the generative AI system doesn't continue to learn, it only knows what it's been told, then if that information is biased or in some way discriminatory, then you're going to build in that discrimination and bias into all future output. It's the 21st century equivalent of one of the oldest principles in computer science, which is garbage in, garbage out. So this is the difficulty that we've got to mitigate against. Now, how can we do that? Well, one way is to make sure that it's not the machine that makes the decision. As I said before, when people are using artificial intelligence to assess whether, for example, they have a good claim in the employment tribunal with reasonable prospects of success, then that's not the right use for the tool. If you ever try to put a nail in a wall with a screwdriver, you know what I'm talking about when it comes to using the wrong tool. Another risk is around health and safety. If the pace of work that people are expected to work at, because the system says that you can produce 74 widgets in a shift, whatever that means, then if you can't, then you're failing to meet the objective requirements of the job. Now, it may be that, if it's a physical thing, you can relatively easily build in reasonable adjustments to say, well, a 74 widget target for this particular person isn't reasonable and we should reduce that down to, 60, something like that, for example. Now, if what you're talking about is more of a knowledge-based occupation, the kind of white-collar jobs that Mustafa Suleyman says is going to be under threat, that it would appear that Amazon has not just placed them under threat, but actually carried out the threat, then increasing the productivity rate brings with it potentially an additional level of stress. Because when you're, taking the time to actually write a letter, the physical act of typing on a keyboard or dictating into a voice recognition system or something like that, it takes time. It allows you time to process, to think about what you're doing. You reflect as you're typing, that you go back and you adapt things, you change the wording because you're not entirely comfortable with it. But if all you do is you say to your AI assistant, you say, draft me a letter that tells this member they haven't got a claim, then where's the time to decompress? Where's the time to process the thinking about the claim? It's just not there. It's not there. We need to make sure that we're balancing the demands of the job and it's not having an adverse impact on the service that's being delivered or on the service deliverer. The get more from less approach to artificial intelligence integration could lead to workers being expected to deal with more work in the same or in less time. When do we take a break? When do we stop and think? That's important. We need to not lose sight of that. These systems are data hungry. Now, that data that these systems use, where does that come from? A lot of it is personal data. A lot of it, frankly, as a population around the world, we're all guilty of this. We've been duped, perhaps, to some extent. How many of us have tagged our friends in photographs? And we think, it's fun at the time because then we can just, click on a name and your computer, your phone, whatever, brings you all the photographs you've got of your friend. And before you know it, it's like it just becomes what you do. And then you get to the point where you don't even need to do that because your phone already knows what your friend looks like. And it then identifies your friend in your latest photographs. When you think about it, what does that actually mean? If you think about a company like Meta, who own and operate Facebook, they've now got huge databases of what everybody looks like. Does that matter? Well, think about their latest development. Have you all seen the Meta glasses with the cameras built into the frames? It all sounds very interesting. You're walking around, you get beginning to get into what's called augmented reality. You can talk to your glasses and they'll start recording things. Apparently, when some Facebook executives were in court in America, they all rocked up wearing Meta glasses. The judge was not impressed. The latest development, apparently, is there's going to be facial recognition built into Meta glasses. Now, does that matter? Well, what if you are, for example, escaping from domestic violence? What if you've changed your name? What if you're in, an FBI witness protection program, for example? And, you're walking along the street where nobody knows you, but now all of a sudden everybody knows you because their glasses will tell them who you are. That's kind of scary stuff. And this is about data privacy. Who owns the data? Who owns your image? If you're walking along the street and somebody takes a photograph of you, who owns that? It's not you. It's the person who takes the photograph. Job security and de-skilling. Will the artificial intelligence replace the whole task or just part of the role? There's an interesting piece I heard recently about journalism students who've been traditionally told that using artificial intelligence systems was akin to plagiarism and that it was a bad thing and they shouldn't be doing it. But increasingly, the role of a journalist will be to get out and get in front of the potential source, to build the trust, to find the information, rather than actually writing the story. Because the AI tool will write the story, and the job of the journalist will be out there to meet the people and gather the information. Now, does that matter? Does it make a difference that the journalist is no longer going to be writing the story? Well, I suppose it does if you became a journalist because you love writing stories. If what you like is the thrill of the chase, the investigation, the digging up the story and meeting people and stuff, then no, it doesn't matter because it frees you up to do more of that. So these are the sort of questions we need to start grappling with because, trust me, this stuff is coming. We can't stop it. It's going to happen. So what can we do about it? I think we need to be using some of the tools that already exist for us. We need to be thinking about the legal and collective bargaining framework. For example, the General Data Protection Regulation, the UK GDPR, Article 22, which deals with automated processing and automated decision making. The data subject, says Article 22 at paragraph 1, shall have the right not to be subject to a decision based solely on automated processing, including profiling, which produces legal effects concerning him or her, or similarly significantly affects him or her. Now, thinking about the context of the driver who is getting scored on every journey, who is being, having their tachograph measured against distance and time and so on. Is that automated processing? Is that automated decision making? Potentially it is. I said before about inbuilt bias and discrimination in the training data. Remember that the Equality Act, Section 19, makes it unlawful to indirectly discriminate against somebody. So if decisions are being made on the basis of discriminatory data, then the employer runs the risk of discriminating against people by using that discriminatory data. So these are the sorts of things we need to be thinking about. Impact assessments, data processing impact assessments and equality impact assessments before new tech is introduced. These are incredibly important. Any new data processing task is supposed to carry with it a data processing impact assessment. We all went through this in 2018 when the Data Protection Act changed and brought with it a number of changes around the legal consequences of getting that stuff wrong. But to be honest, that's 8 years ago. I think perhaps we've become a little bit complacent around data processing, and I'm not entirely sure that all of our organizations out there are still doing data protection impact assessments whenever they start any new data processing activities. Maybe we need to be doing that. And perhaps there's an opportunity through collective agreements to make sure that any decisions that are made, there is always human intervention. So, rather than just simply saying to somebody, your scores are not good enough on the driving metrics and therefore we're going to let you go. No. Or whatever it is, whatever the automated processing is, whatever the artificial intelligence processing is, let's not be doing that. Let's make sure that there is an opportunity for a human to review the data, to hear from the person concerned, and let's make sure decisions are made by people, not by machines. We need to be looking at recognition agreements in the workplace. We need to be looking at collective bargaining agreements and making sure that we've got established a duty for management to consult with us before purchasing or implementing any new software. This stuff's really potentially important. I mean, you look at the Amazon model, where 30,000 people have lost their jobs. I'm not saying it would be any different in Amazon if it was a different I don't know what's the word, a different kind of environment for industrial relations. They're maybe not the greatest example of working together with your workforce, with giving people a voice in the workplace. But would that have made a difference? Maybe, I don't know. So how do we organize around artificial intelligence? I think it would be helpful if we, as reps or officers or whoever, if we're clear with our members, where is artificial intelligence beginning to creep in? Are there things like scheduling apps? Is there a tool that says where you have to go? If you think about, many of us will have used Uber cars, the system decides where the driver has to go, and if the driver doesn't follow the prescribed route, then they're penalised. That's helpful, I suppose, in some respects from a passenger safety perspective. But if that's something that's rolled out more widely, then maybe there's a reason why a worker who has a number of calls to make on a particular day wouldn't want to necessarily follow them in a particular order. But if the system says they have to, do they get into trouble? is there scope for people to use professional judgment, for example? I think many of us, I know I have colleagues who are kind of, I wouldn't say closed off, but maybe concerned is perhaps a better word for, tech fearful, as the slide puts it. Somebody said to me the other day, when are we going to be given training to identify when artificial intelligence has been used? And I, perhaps controversially, asked the question, does it matter? Because it's just another tool. If somebody produces a letter and then sends it in, they've adopted the content of the letter. It doesn't matter, surely, how the letter's been produced. We don't, for example, treat a letter differently because it's come by email than how we would treat it if it was written with a biro on a piece of paper. We're more interested in what it says, not how it's written. So we need to be, I think, making sure that we are using these tools, as I've said there, ethically, that there is a place for artificial intelligence, but it can't just be that we rush forward and embrace it and use every single possible opportunity to use artificial intelligence. I heard a story recently about somebody who works within a sort of data science, artificial intelligence environment, who adopted a new, I forget what it's called, a new tool that would manage all of your communications across messaging networks, WhatsApps, emails, and everything. And they posted a video of themselves telling them the app to stop doing what it was doing and having zero control, because what the system was doing was deleting emails from the person's inbox. These were like unread emails from the inbox, or emails, for example, they wanted to keep, but the system had decided there was just too much there, so it decided to start deleting all of these emails. And this was from a person who works in the artificial intelligence community. And apparently they had to rush off and just grab their Mac Mini and save it in order to preserve the emails. So, be careful is what I'm saying. But be careful, but don't be afraid, is what I would say. Yeah, just be sensible. And I think, the slide says building alliances, working with data sciences and legal experts to challenge management's claims. Now, I was thinking about this after, produced these slides, and I was thinking, how many of us have access to data scientists? Well, the thing is, a lot of our members sit on European Works Councils. Now, the thing about EWCs is that the rules that regulate European Works Councils allow the Works Council to instruct their own experts, their own independent experts. Now, if you happen to sit on an EWC and you have an employer who wants to begin to use some of this technology, then potentially there's scope for you to start to challenge and to get access to those experts who really understand what all this stuff means. Anyway, that's what I think about artificial intelligence. Hopefully that's been interesting and thought-provoking, and it is kind of slightly off topic in the sense of, these are supposed to be legal update webinars, and the next one I promise to talk more about some employment law or legal issues, but I thought this was an important one to address because we're seeing artificial intelligence becoming much more of an issue in the way that we deliver services to members, particularly when, unfortunately, a member's been told they haven't got a case and they disagree with us. One that will always stick in my mind is when a member, with the help of ChatGPT, produced a letter for us which said that the best claim they had was for injury to feelings. Now, injury to feelings is not a claim. It's a type of compensation, ironically, for discrimination, but it's not a claim. But the AI tool said that that was the best claim they had. And frankly, if that's the best claim you've had, and that's no claim at all, well, what does that tell you? So that's why I thought this was a useful topic for us to broach, and I hope it's been useful. Thanks again, everybody. Bye for now.